What's up, everybody? It's your girl Siquoyia Blue back here with another episode. And this is the Welcomes Podcast where we challenge your perspective. So I just finished reading this really good book called The Midnight Library. And I was really impressed by this author. His name is Matt Haig, and he's a UK writer. I just like how he wrote the story out and how he explained everything and how it just made you think about your own life, basically, because Nora, the main character in the book, she is a 35-year-old woman and she lives in the UK, and she thinks that everything in her life is just going down the drain because of the choices she made when she was younger. Her dad wanted her to be this famous swimmer. She just couldn't do that. Her brother wanted her to be in the band, and even though she loved music, she just couldn't do that neither. So she had so many regrets and stuff. And I think that just happens in life where we we have these opportunities and sometimes it just doesn't happen that way. Things change, maybe feelings change, maybe anxiety, who knows. But the interesting thing about this book is that I always talk about the butterfly effect. And if you've been rocking with me and listening to my episodes, I always say, what would happen if you go back in time, or would you want to go back in time and change things and make it better if you could? Or just to jump into that universe and see if you would like it. And one thing about this book, it goes into Nora, and this is going to be a little bit of spoiler, but you got to read the book to really get all the deets and stuff. So I'm not really spoiling it, but she goes into all these different dimensions in the Midnight Library. And it's because she basically was at the end of her wits. She didn't want to live anymore. And she ends up in another dimension, if you will. But her real self is still passed out in her original dimension. Like she's on her way of dying, basically. But while she's possibly dying, she jumps into the Midnight Library, which is hosted by her old librarian from high school named Miss Elm. And Miss Elm is not real per se, of course, but she's like from her imagination because that's who she was closest to growing up. She didn't really have a lot of friends and stuff. And Miss Elm was like that rock outside of her parents and her brother. So Miss Elm was in the Midnight Library and she told her you have a chance to open any book you want and jump into multiple universes, like jump into a universe when you did become a famous singer, jump into a universe where you did become a famous oceanographer or geologist or whatever, jump in, and I thought that was so freaking interesting because as Nora jumps into all these lives, she still wasn't happy, right? Because I think all of us were like, okay, we just jump into being a millionaire, we're just gonna be happy. That's just that. Now, don't get me wrong, can money solve a lot of things? Oh yeah. But it doesn't guarantee happiness. So she jumps into all these dimensions and she just couldn't find herself, right? So she couldn't say, oh, this is where I want to be. Even when she became that famous singer and everybody was shouting her name and all this stuff, it still it wasn't her. It wasn't her story because it just wasn't her, right? Because you're jumping into a story and that's not how, I guess you could say, the ways of the universe is working. And there's a show on Netflix called Dark that I think y'all should check out where it's kind of similar, but it's a German show and it's similar to that where whatever you do can impact others around you. So one thing about the story is Nora noticed because she chose at one point, she was a different dimension and she was like, I want to see how my neighbor is doing in this dimension, in this universe. But of course, her neighbor had a different outcome because Nora wasn't there to get his pills and all the things that she did to help him stay alive, unbeknownst to her, even though they weren't best friends hanging out every day. But the little stuff that Nora did for him kept him alive. And so when she didn't stay in that universe, his life turned out to be different. Same thing with a student she had. She had a student that she would teach piano because she wasn't in that universe. That student ended up being a troublesome kid, ended up being a troublesome man, ended up being out there on the streets and doing things he shouldn't be doing because he didn't have her guidance to like calm him and teach him music and help him focus on his music. So all these things she noticed was all because of decisions that she made. But all these different universes, all these different these stories she jumped in, like she was all these different people. But at the end of the day, there was nothing like being herself. It was nothing like being her and who she was supposed to be. So I'm not going to spoil the story too much, but what I got to say is that one thing I learned from this book is that we all have to understand that we all can say, if I would have done this differently, then I would have this or that. Don't get me wrong. Can things go better in certain ways? Yes, but there's always going to be another problem. There's always going to be something else that's going to come up. So even if you did become that millionaire, there's something else going on the side. If you did become that doctor, there's something else that's going to happen. There's always going to be something that's going to just get on your nerves. So don't sit here and be like, oh, let me go back in time and all stuff like that, because it's no point. Just be you, be where you're at, because going back in time doesn't guarantee nothing. And that's what this story is basically saying. Just live the life that you have, rather it's messy and all sorts of stuff, because nothing's going to be perfect. There is no perfect life. So once she realized that, Nora was able to just live the way she was supposed to live her life. And so you got to read the book, because there's so many nuances. I can't, tell you everything. And, because it's something about reading the book. It's something about sitting down and reading it, or listen to it if you want to listen to it, and getting into it yourself. But you gotta want to live your life the way that you want to live it in order to live it, basically. And that's what the story's about. Just wanting to live your life, and not being at someone's mercy, basically, saying, okay, but I didn't do this for my dad, or I didn't do this for my brother, but just living life the way you want to live it. And I think that's what makes it fruitful, not living in those regrets. So I would say check out the book, man. It was a banger. It was one of the best books I've read in a long time. The Midnight Library by Matt Haig. And it just, yeah, it's going to challenge your perspective. And that's what this show is about. So if everybody's been rocking me, I thank you guys. Please share this episode if you feel like it resonated with you. Let everybody know about me. Write a review. And if you read the book, let me know what you think about the book. Write a comment. Let me know. All right. Till next time. Peace.